He had been on the road for weeks. The city had blurred into a haze of airports, meetings, and hotel rooms. The life of a millionaire was often glamorous in appearance, but to him it had grown tiresome and lonely. He missed simple things, quiet mornings, the sound of birds outside his window, and the familiar rhythm of home. It was unusual for him to return without notice, but this time, something inside told him to leave the schedule behind and just go. No phone calls. No announcements. Just go home. The drive back was long, the streets of the city stretching endlessly. He had grown accustomed to speed, to the constant buzz of work, but now he moved slower. He took in the streets he had passed by countless times, noticing the small shops, the children playing in the corners, the way the sunlight hit the buildings differently in the afternoon. He realized he had missed these moments because he was always in a rush. He realized he had missed a lot, as his car turned into the driveway of his sprawling home. He felt an unusual flutter of excitement. The mansion was large, imposing even with polished gates and a driveway that seemed to go on forever. From the outside, it was perfect, flawless, the kind of home that commanded respect. But he knew that behind its walls, life went on quietly, and it had been days since he had witnessed it. He wondered how things had changed, if they had changed at all. He paused for a moment in the car, looking up at the windows where the sun reflected brightly. Memories of his first days in this home came back to him. He had worked hard for everything he had, often sacrificing personal relationships for business success. The rooms that now seemed so still had once been filled with laughter and life. And somehow, somewhere along the way, that laughter had faded. The thought made him uneasy, and he knew he was ready to reconnect. Even if it was just in small ways, he opened the car door and stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes. The air smelled of earth and flowers, the kind of smell that city life rarely offered. He walked toward the front door, slowing his pace as he passed the gardens. The roses were blooming, vibrant and red, and he realized he hadn't seen them like this in years. The care that had gone into tending them was clear. He thought of the staff who worked silently behind the scenes, keeping this home not just beautiful but alive. There was one person in particular, he wondered about the maid. She had been with the household for a long time, and though she rarely stood out, he knew she was the backbone of the daily routine. As he opened the door, he noticed the quiet of the house. No phones ringing, no clattering of dishes in the kitchen, no television blaring in the living room. The silence was comforting and strange all at once. He took a slow breath, letting the familiar scent of the house fill him. It was a mixture of polished wood, fresh laundry, and a faint hint of something he couldn't name, something that felt like home. He walked further inside, careful not to announce his presence too soon. He had always been aware that the people working for him were used to strict schedules and routines. Interruptions could be unsettling. He wanted to observe quietly, to see the rhythm of life here when he was not part of it. As he moved down the hallway, he could hear faint noises coming from the kitchen. A soft hum, a scrape of dishes, and the quiet shuffle of someone moving quickly but efficiently. He recognized it instantly. The maid, she was busy, focused on her work. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, yet there was a grace to her actions. She cleaned, arranged, and tidied with such care that it was obvious she took pride in her work. He realized that despite being wealthy, he had never truly seen her dedication before. She had always been there, a constant presence, but somehow invisible to him in his busyness. He stood quietly, watching, noticing the small details that made life in this house run smoothly. Her uniform was simple, plain, but neat. Her hands moved quickly but gently over the surfaces, wiping away dust and making everything shine. She hummed a tune softly, and he noticed a small smile tug at the corner of her lips as she worked. It was a smile he had never seen in meetings, in business calls, or even in the rare times they had spoken. There was something about this moment, this simple act of dedication, that made him pause. He realized that life, real life, existed in these moments that were often unnoticed. He took another step forward, making sure his shoes did not squeak on the polished floor. She didn't notice him yet, completely absorbed in her tasks. He thought about how often people overlooked the importance of people like Hertha, quiet workers, the unseen heroes of daily life. How much of his own life had been about seeing only results, ignoring the hands that made those results possible? The thought weighed on him. He felt a sense of humility, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He watched her straighten the table, arrange the silverware, and set things perfectly. Her efficiency was impressive, but what caught his attention more was the care. She treated each item as if it mattered, as if the way she did her work could change the world in some small way. He smiled to himself, realizing that she was doing exactly that. She was making the home run smoothly, making life easier for everyone inside. And yet she had no audience, no recognition. She did it simply because it was right. He thought about his own life, filled with meetings, deals, and schedules. How often had he worked tirelessly for results, for money, for prestige, and yet missed the human effort around him? He felt a pang of regret, wishing he had paid more attention, had acknowledged more often. Watching her, he realized how easy it was to miss the value of someone's presence when it did not make a loud noise or create immediate recognition. Life had a quiet side, and he had almost forgotten it. Suddenly, the maid paused. She straightened her back, taking a moment to look out the window as if checking the world outside. The sunlight hit her face, and he noticed the softness in her expression, the quiet strength in her posture. She seemed unbothered by the grandeur of the house or the wealth surrounding her. She was grounded in her own world, focused on what mattered to her. He felt a deep respect growing inside him, a recognition that true value was often hidden in plain sight. He stepped closer, careful not to startle her. He wanted to speak, but words seemed inadequate. How could he capture the respect and admiration he suddenly felt? How could he convey that he had noticed her finally? He thought about knocking lightly on the counter, but hesitated. He didn't want to interrupt her flow, her rhythm. Instead, he simply observed, feeling a strange mix of awe and gratitude. The minutes passed slowly. He realized that being home, unexpectedly, allowed him to see the layers of life he had missed. The maid was more than a worker. She was a caretaker of memories, a keeper of order, and a silent contributor to the comfort and dignity of everyone in the house. Her presence was a reminder that life's true value often lay in small, consistent acts of dedication. He took a deep breath and reflected on how little he had noticed in the past. He had lived surrounded by luxury, yet he had been blind to the people who made that luxury possible. The contrast struck him deeply. He had chased success, money, and recognition, and in doing so, had overlooked the very human connections that gave life meaning. Watching her, he felt a shift within himself, a softening that he hadn't experienced in years. Finally, she turned, reaching for a dish, and for the first time she looked directly at him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. The look on her face was one of curiosity, not fear. She did not know he had returned. She was alert, professional, but there was a warmth there that he had never noticed. He smiled gently, letting her see that he was there, that he had come home, that he had finally noticed. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition of effort, a mutual respect, and the beginning of understanding. He realized that this encounter, simple as it was, had already changed him. The house, the wealth, the status, all of it, faded in comparison to the quiet dignity of a person doing their work with care and honesty. He knew that the next steps would matter. How he treated her, how he acknowledged her, would set the tone for their future interactions. He also knew that he had a lot to learn from her example. There was a lesson in humility, in appreciation, in noticing what often went unseen. The rest of the house could wait. The deals could wait. For now, he was here, and this was the moment that truly mattered. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. The house was alive in a way he had almost forgotten. The sounds, the movements, the quiet rhythm of life. It was all real, all human, and entirely grounding. And it began with a single person, unnoticed until now, showing him that value was not always measured by wealth or status, but by dedication, care, and the quiet strength to keep going no matter who was watching. He decided to take his time, moving quietly through the house. The familiar walls no longer felt empty. There was a rhythm, a subtle pulse that had always been there, but he had never truly noticed it. The maid moved from room to room with ease, handling every task as if it were second nature. He watched her closely, realizing that what he had assumed was simple work was actually a complex orchestration of care, timing, and attention. She straightened pillows on the sofa, picked up a book that had fallen to the floor, and wiped the surface of the coffee table with careful precision. Every movement was deliberate, yet she seemed to flow naturally from one task to another. He realized how often he had been in this house, surrounded by comfort, and never paused to see the effort it took to maintain it. It was not just cleaning. It was nurturing, preserving, protecting a space that had become meaningful to him without his noticing. He moved closer to the kitchen, curious about what she was doing there. The smell of freshly brewed tea filled the room. He could hear the faint clinking of cups and the soft sound of water being poured. She had prepared a small tray, arranging it neatly with a cup, a small plate of biscuits, and a folded napkin. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. She had thought about comfort, about creating a small moment of calm and care. Even in her routine, she found ways to make life a little warmer for the people in the house. He realized he had never thanked her, never acknowledged the countless small things she had done over the years. His wealth had made him used to luxury, but it had also blinded him to the effort behind it. He felt a twinge of shame knowing he had been so focused on his own life that he had overlooked someone who had been quietly supporting his household all along. He decided to speak to her, but he didn't want to startle her. He cleared his throat softly, and she looked up, slightly startled, her hands freezing mid-motion. When she saw him, her expression shifted. Surprise, then recognition, and finally a polite smile. She had always maintained a professional demeanor, and he had never seen her break it, even in the smallest ways. "You're back earlier than expected," she said softly. Trying to maintain her composure, he nodded, smiling faintly. "I wanted to come home. I realized I had been gone for too long." His voice was quiet, almost unsure, but it carried sincerity. He had expected a polite acknowledgement and perhaps some small words of welcome. But the moment felt heavier, deeper, more real than he had imagined. She nodded again, turning her attention back to the tea, but he noticed the small hesitation in her movements. He could see that she had been curious, perhaps even worried, about his sudden return. He realized that she had a life beyond these walls, responsibilities, concerns, and perhaps dreams that he had never asked about. He had been so absorbed in his own world that he had assumed the people around him were simply part of the background, their lives secondary to his own. He poured himself a cup of tea, letting the warm aroma fill the space between them. The silence was comfortable, not awkward. He realized that he had been chasing noise, activity, and distraction for so long that he had forgotten the value of quiet presence. He wanted to ask her about her life, her days, and her challenges, but he was also aware that he needed to listen, truly listen, without interrupting or imposing. Finally, he spoke. "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" She looked at him, slightly surprised by the question. "Yes," she said simply. "It's been many years. I try to do my work well, to keep things in order. It's not much, but it matters to me." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. She wasn't boasting or complaining. She was stating a fact, a quiet truth. Her dedication was not for recognition or reward. It was because she cared about her responsibilities and took pride in them. He felt a deep respect growing inside him, a humility he hadn't felt in years. He sat down at the kitchen table, gesturing for her to join him. She hesitated for a moment, then moved to the chair opposite him. It was unusual for him to sit with the staff, to engage in conversation like this, but he felt it was necessary. He needed to understand, to connect, to bridge the gap that had existed for so long. They spoke slowly at first, sharing small details about the day. He learned about the challenges she faced, the errands she ran, and the care she put into maintaining the household. She spoke about her family, about her hopes and struggles, and he realized how little he had known. He had assumed her life was simple, routine, and limited to the house. But she had a world of her own, full of depth and meaning, that he had never taken the time to see. He listened intently, Noticing the way she spoke with quiet confidence and honesty, there was no pretense, no embellishment. She told him about the pride she felt in her work, the joy in small accomplishments, and the difficulties she faced without complaint. Each word painted a picture of resilience, dedication, and integrity. He felt a pang of guilt for not recognizing it sooner, but also a surge of admiration for her strength and character. As the conversation continued, he realized that she had a sense of independence and dignity that he had never expected. She did not seek pity or charity. She wanted respect and understanding. Her life had been challenging, but she faced it with grace and determination. He felt humbled, seeing in her a reflection of the values he had overlooked in his own pursuit of success. He asked her about her routines, the tasks she performed daily, and the care she put into every detail. She explained with patience, showing him how each small action contributed to the smooth running of the household. He began to see the house not as a structure of wealth, but as a living entity, maintained and nurtured by her efforts. Each polished surface, each neatly arranged item, each small touch of care was a testament to her presence. He found himself opening up as well, sharing small stories about his travels, his work, and the loneliness he sometimes felt, despite the wealth and success surrounding him. She listened without judgment, her eyes attentive, her expressions thoughtful. There was a connection forming, not of status or position, but of shared humanity. He realized that this moment, this simple exchange, was more meaningful than any meeting or business deal he had attended in months. Time seemed to slow as they spoke. The usual distractions of the house faded away. He noticed the way the sunlight fell on her hands as she moved them while speaking, the slight smile that crossed her face when she recounted a story, the calm steadiness in her voice. Each detail made him more aware of the depth of her presence, the care she put into everything she did, and the dignity with which she lived her life. He paused, reflecting on his own life. He had chased achievements, recognition, and wealth, often ignoring the human connections that truly mattered. Watching her, listening to her, he realized how much he had missed. There was richness here, not of money, but of character, strength, and quiet resilience. He felt a profound respect for her, a recognition of the value of her life and work, and an understanding of the importance of noticing and appreciating the people around him. She continued with her tasks, but now with a sense of ease, knowing that he had truly seen her, acknowledged her presence, and respected her efforts. He felt a shift within himself, a softening, a humility that had been absent for years. He realized that wealth and success were meaningless without awareness of the human effort that sustained them. He had returned home expecting comfort, but he had found something far more valuable: understanding, connection, and a reminder of the quiet strength that exists in the everyday lives of ordinary people. By the time the tea was finished, he knew that this moment would stay with him. It was not the grandeur of the mansion, the wealth, or the possessions that mattered. It was the recognition of human effort, the connection between two people, and the understanding that life's true value often lay in simple, unacknowledged acts of care. He thanked her sincerely, not with a small nod or fleeting words, but with genuine gratitude. She smiled, a mixture of modesty and surprise, accepting his words with quiet dignity. There was no need for grand gestures. The acknowledgement itself was enough, a bridge formed between their worlds, and a reminder that respect and recognition could transform ordinary interactions into meaningful moments. He left the kitchen, feeling lighter than he had in months. The house no longer felt like a place of solitude or routine. It was alive, vibrant, with human effort, care, and connection. He knew that the next days would hold more lessons, more discoveries, and deeper understanding, but for now, he allowed himself to simply be present, appreciating the quiet strength of the person who had quietly maintained this home for so long. In that moment, he understood that true wealth was not measured by money or possessions, but by the connections we make, the respect we show, and the recognition we give to those whose efforts often go unseen. And he knew, without a doubt, that the maid before him embodied that truth in ways he had never imagined. The house was quiet, but it was not empty. He moved through the rooms, noticing details he had never paid attention to before, the way the curtains fell perfectly in the living room, the soft scent of flowers that seemed to linger no matter how often they were replaced, the polished floors that reflected the sunlight streaming through the windows. Everything was in order, every corner cared for. Yet what struck him most was not the cleanliness or the order, the presence of someone who clearly poured effort and attention into every detail. He heard a faint sound coming from upstairs, soft and rhythmic. Curious, he followed it, moving quietly up the staircase. As he reached the top, he saw her again. The maid was in the guest room, arranging clothes and straightening the beds. There was a calmness to her movements, a quiet confidence in how she handled every item. She hummed softly, lost in her own world, unaware that anyone was watching her. He felt a strange mix of admiration and surprise. He had seen her work before, but now he saw something different, something more personal, more human, more profound. She paused for a moment, looking out the window, her hands resting on the sill. The sunlight hit her face, and he could see a small crease of worry in her brow, a faint tension that had been hidden behind professionalism. He realized that while she appeared composed and calm, there were layers to her life that he had never understood. He wondered what burdens she carried, what dreams she held, how she managed to balance them all while maintaining the grace he now noticed. He stepped closer, wanting to speak, but hesitated. There was a delicate balance here. He did not want to intrude, to disturb the rhythm of her day. He simply wanted to observe, to understand, to see the person behind the role she had always played. And then it happened. She moved toward a small closet, reaching for a box on the top shelf. He watched as she struggled slightly with its weight. In an instant, she shifted, balancing the box carefully on her hip while she opened the door fully. He could see the strain in her arms, the careful way she managed each movement, yet she did not complain. She adjusted the box, shifted it to her other side, and gently set it down on the bed, carefully organizing its contents. For a moment, he just stood there, amazed. It was such a small act, such a simple task, and yet it revealed so much. He realized how much effort she put into things that were often invisible to others. Every movement, every adjustment, every tiny action carried thought, care, and consideration. It was not simply work. It was devotion, discipline, and dignity combined. He stepped closer, unable to contain his curiosity. "You've been doing this for a long time, haven't you?" he asked softly. She looked up, startled for a moment, and then smiled politely. "Yes, many years. It's not much, but I try to do my best. The house deserves care." He nodded, feeling a swell of admiration. "It's more than that. You care about everything here, in a way I've never noticed before." She paused, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. For a moment, she seemed unsure how to respond. Then, softly, she said, "I care because it matters. Because people notice even if they don't say it. I want to do what's right." He felt a lump in his throat. Her words were simple, but they carried weight, truth, and an integrity he had not encountered in a long time. He realized that this was why he was home, why he had returned unexpectedly. He needed to see this. He needed to understand what it meant to care without expectation, to give without seeking recognition, to perform small acts of kindness that ripple through people's lives in ways unnoticed but profound. She moved again, continuing her work, but now he noticed something he had never seen before. She had organized a small corner of the room with personal touches, photos of her family, small mementos from her life, a neatly folded blanket that had clearly been arranged with care. It was a quiet space, almost hidden, yet it spoke volumes about who she was. She carried her life into her work, blending responsibility with memory, effort with love. He felt his heart swell with admiration. He had always thought of her as a worker, a part of the household machinery, someone whose role was to maintain order. Now he saw her as a person, a human being with depth, experience, and emotion. The realization hit him hard. He had been blind for years, overlooking the quiet strength and humanity of the people around him. Then, something unexpected happened. She leaned down to adjust the blanket and noticed that a small frame had slipped slightly out of place. Without thinking, she moved quickly, balancing herself carefully, and straightened it perfectly. But in the process, she lost her footing slightly, and the box she had just arranged teetered dangerously. In a heartbeat, she caught it, preventing its contents from falling. He froze, watching, his heart racing. The action was quick, almost instinctive, yet it revealed a side of her he had never seen before. Decisive, courageous. He realized in that instant that she had been managing far more than the household. She carried responsibility, attention, and vigilance in ways that had gone unnoticed. He was stunned, his jaw tightening as he took in the magnitude of what he had witnessed. For the first time, he truly understood the effort she had put in every day. It was not just about cleaning or organizing. It was about anticipation, problem-solving, and care under pressure. He felt a deep respect, a humility that softened him in ways he hadn't felt in years. He had thought of wealth as power, as influence, as control. But now he saw that real strength lay in consistency, attention, and devotion to even the smallest tasks. She turned to him then, noticing him for the first time fully. There was a flash of surprise in her eyes, a brief hesitation, and then recognition. "You're back," she said softly. He nodded, struggling to find the right words. "Yes, I've been away too long, and I see now. I didn't realize what I was missing." Her expression softened, and she returned to her work, though more relaxed now, knowing he had seen her, truly seen her. She did not speak much, but her presence carried a quiet confidence and pride that resonated in the room. He understood that this moment, this unexpected return, had given him a glimpse into her life that he would never forget. He stayed close, observing her for a while longer. She moved efficiently, with a rhythm that spoke of years of practice, experience, and dedication. He saw how she balanced tasks, anticipating needs before they were spoken, managing challenges without complaint, and maintaining an environment of calm and order. Each action, small as it seemed, reflected patience, skill, and character. He thought about his own life, the business deals, meetings, and endless planning. How often had he acted without seeing the people who supported him? How often had he valued results over effort, outcomes over process, success over human connection? Watching her, he realized how much he had missed, how much he had overlooked, and how much he had to learn. Finally, she finished arranging the room and stepped back, surveying her work. She smiled softly, not for recognition, but for satisfaction in a job done well. He approached her, feeling the need to speak, to acknowledge what he had witnessed. "I've watched you," he said quietly, "and I need you to know. What you do matters. More than I can say." She looked at him, surprise evident in her eyes. "Thank you. I just do what I can." He shook his head gently. "It's more than just what you can. It's every little thing, every detail, every choice you make to care, to anticipate, to protect. You've kept this house, this home, alive in ways I didn't even realize. And I'm amazed. Truly amazed." For the first time, he saw a tear in her eye, quickly brushed away, almost hidden. It wasn't sadness. It was a quiet acknowledgement, an understanding that her efforts were finally seen. He realized in that moment that recognition didn't have to be loud or grand. It could be simple, honest, and heartfelt. That alone was enough to bridge the gap between them. They stood together in the room, the sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating the care she had taken, the effort she had invested, and the human strength that had always been there. He understood now that the true surprise of his return was not just seeing her, but realizing the depth of her presence, the value of her labor, and the quiet power she held in shaping the life around her. And in that quiet, unassuming room, a change occurred, not in the house, not in the wealth, not in the possessions, but in him. He was no longer the distant observer, the distracted millionaire. He was a witness, a participant, and above all, a human being recognizing the humanity of another. He watched her work for a few more minutes, noticing the subtle gestures that spoke so much about her character, the way she handled each item with care, the way she moved with quiet confidence. And the calm attention she gave to every task made him reflect on how often he had overlooked such qualities in the past. It was easy to see someone as just doing their job, but now he realized the life, thought, and effort behind each small act. Finally, he took a deep breath and decided to speak more openly. He wanted to know her not just as the maid who kept his house in order, but as a human being with a life, hopes, and challenges. "Can I ask you something?" he said softly, careful not to startle her. She nodded politely, pausing her work. "Of course." He hesitated for a moment, unsure how to begin. I don't know much about you," he admitted. "I've been so focused on my own life, on work, on schedules, that I never stopped to see the person who keeps everything running smoothly here. I want to know. Your story?" She looked at him, slightly surprised. It was rare for anyone in the house to ask about her life. Usually, she was treated as part of the background, someone who existed to serve, not someone to be listened to. For a moment, she seemed uncertain, but then a gentle smile appeared on her face. She gestured for him to sit at the table, and he did, ready to listen. She began slowly, speaking with quiet humility. She talked about her family, the small joys and challenges that shaped her days, and the sacrifices she had made to support them. She told him about the long hours, the responsibility she carried, and the dedication it took to maintain the home while still managing the needs of those she loved outside it. Her words were simple, but they carried depth and sincerity. He listened carefully, realizing how little he had known. He had assumed her life was straightforward, routine, and limited to the walls of the house. Now he saw the fullness of it, the responsibilities, the resilience, and the quiet strength required to face each day. She was not just a maid, she was a provider, a caretaker, and a human being with dreams, struggles, and determination. As she spoke, he noticed small details, how her eyes lit up when she mentioned her children, the way her hands moved to emphasize a point, the subtle pauses when she recalled difficult times. Each gesture and expression revealed more about her life and character than words alone could convey. He realized that for years, he had overlooked the people around him, missing the richness of their experiences while chasing achievements and wealth. He asked gentle questions, wanting to understand more, to hear her perspective, and to connect. She answered with honesty, never seeking pity, only sharing her truth. She told him about moments of exhaustion, times when she worried about her family, and the small victories that made her proud. Each story painted a picture of resilience, courage, and grace that left him in awe. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect growing within him. He realized that her life, her work, and her presence had quietly shaped the environment he had taken for granted. She had maintained the household, cared for its inhabitants, and contributed to a sense of order and comfort that he had rarely acknowledged. And she had done it all without complaint, without seeking recognition, simply because it was right and necessary. He shared some of his own experiences as well, not to compare, but to build a connection. He spoke of the pressures of his work, the loneliness that often accompanied success, and the times he had felt disconnected from the people and places that mattered most. She listened attentively, offering understanding without judgment, her presence providing a sense of grounding and comfort that he had not expected. They continued talking, conversation flowing naturally. He learned about her aspirations, the small goals she held for herself and her family, and the ways she found joy in simple moments. He realized that despite the challenges she faced, she maintained a sense of hope and purpose that he had often lacked in his own life. Her resilience was quiet but powerful. It left a profound impression on him. As the hours passed, he felt a shift within himself. He no longer saw her as merely a member of the staff. He saw her as a human being, worthy of respect, acknowledgement, and understanding. He realized that his own perspective had been limited, shaped by distance, routine, and the assumptions of wealth. Now, in this quiet moment, he gained insight into the life and strength of someone he had long overlooked. He watched as she continued her tasks, now more relaxed in his presence. He noticed the way she organized items, cleaned surfaces, and attended to details with care and precision. Each action reflected her dedication, skill, and character. He understood that her work was not just a job. It was an expression of who she was, a blend of responsibility, integrity, and humanity. He felt compelled to acknowledge her contribution, not in passing, but with sincerity. "I want you to know," he said softly, "that I see what you do. I see the care, the effort, and the thought you put into everything. It matters more than I can say." She looked at him, her expression a mixture of surprise and modesty. "Thank you," she replied quietly. "I don't do it for recognition. But it's nice to hear that it's noticed." He smiled, feeling a warmth he had not experienced in years. He realized that recognition, simple and heartfelt, could mean more than wealth or material reward. Acknowledging her effort and humanity was a small act with a powerful impact. They continued talking, and he began to ask about the challenges she faced, the ways she managed her responsibilities, and the moments that brought her pride. She shared openly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. He listened without interruption, allowing her to speak her truth and recognizing the depth of her experience. He noticed that she had learned to navigate life with resilience, balancing work, family, and personal needs with skill and grace. Her strength was quiet, unassuming, yet undeniable. He felt humbled by the realization that she had endured and managed so much without complaint, without fanfare, and often without acknowledgement. He reflected on his own life and the ways he had overlooked the contributions of others. He had measured success in terms of wealth, achievement, and status, often ignoring the human effort that sustained it all. Now, watching and listening to her, he understood that true value lay in dedication, care, and the quiet strength to face life's challenges with integrity. He decided that he would make a change, not just in his perspective, but in how he interacted with those around him. He wanted to ensure that her efforts were recognized, appreciated, and respected. He understood that gestures of gratitude and acknowledgement could transform lives, providing dignity, pride, and a sense of connection that money alone could never offer. She continued her work, but now with a sense of ease and comfort. He realized that his presence, his attention, and his recognition had already made a difference. She no longer moved cautiously or nervously. She carried herself with confidence. Knowing that someone had truly seen her, he felt a deep sense of responsibility. Not as a wealthy employer, but as a human being acknowledging another human being. He wanted to show appreciation not just in words, but in meaningful actions that would reflect the respect and admiration he felt. As the day continued, he found himself observing the small routines of the household with renewed awareness. He noticed the way she anticipated needs, solved problems before they arose, and maintained a sense of calm and order even in small challenges. Each observation reinforced his understanding of her skill, dedication, and humanity. He began to ask questions about her future aspirations, the goals she hoped to achieve, and the ways he might support her in meaningful ways. She responded with humility, sharing her hopes without expectation, and he felt inspired to help, not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect and care. By the end of the day, he realized that this encounter had changed him profoundly. He had returned home seeking comfort, but he had found understanding, connection, an insight into the human experience he had long ignored. He had witnessed resilience, care, and dedication in its purest form, and he understood that these qualities were worth far more than wealth or status. He stood at the window, looking out at the garden, reflecting on the day. The sunlight bathed the house in warmth, highlighting the care and attention that had gone into every detail. He thought about the countless acts of dedication that had gone unnoticed, the quiet strength that shaped the life around him, and the value of acknowledging and honoring such effort. He turned to her, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you for everything," he said softly. "Not just for today, but for all the days you've kept this house and all the lives here, cared for and in order. I don't know if I ever truly noticed before, but I do now." She looked at him, her expression touched with emotion, and nodded quietly. "It's my work, but it feels good to be seen. Thank you." He smiled, feeling a warmth that went beyond words or gestures. In that moment, he understood that recognition, respect, and genuine human connection were among life's most valuable treasures. And he knew that this day, this conversation, and this understanding would stay with him forever. Shaping the way he saw the people and the world around him, the evening had settled softly over the house, painting the rooms in warm shades of gold and amber. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, touching every surface with a gentle glow. He stood in the living room, observing the space that now felt more alive than it had in years. It was not the grandeur of the furniture or the wealth around him that gave the room warmth. It was her. Her presence had transformed the house into a home, and he could no longer imagine it without the quiet care she gave every corner, every task, every detail. He thought about the hours they had spent talking, the stories she had shared, and the lessons he had learned simply by watching her. He realized that life had a quiet power that often went unnoticed. She had reminded him of the value of attention, dedication, and human connection. And now, as the day wound down, he felt a determination growing inside him, a need to act, to show gratitude in a way that went beyond words. He approached her gently. She was arranging some items on the counter in the kitchen, humming softly to herself. He could see the comfort and confidence in her posture, the sense of ease she carried now that he had truly noticed her efforts. "I want to do something," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I want to make sure you know how much I appreciate everything you do." She looked up, startled for a moment, then curious. I don't need anything," she said softly. "I do my work because it matters to me, not because I expect rewards." He shook his head, smiling gently. "I know that now. But I also know that it's important to recognize effort and dedication. You've been keeping this home together, supporting everyone quietly, and I've realized how much that matters. I want to make sure you feel the respect and appreciation you deserve." Her eyes widened slightly, touched by his words. For the first time, she seemed to consider that her work was truly being seen, not just noticed as part of the household routine, but appreciated for the care, thought, and effort she invested. She had spent years giving, often without acknowledgement. And now, for the first time, someone was offering more than a simple nod of thanks. He led her to a small sitting area in the living room, where they could speak comfortably. He wanted to understand her life more deeply, not just in passing, but in a way that honored her as a person. "I want to know more about your life," he said. "About your family, your dreams, and the things that make you happy. You've shared some stories already, but I want to understand fully." She hesitated briefly, the humility and modesty she had carried for years making her pause. But then she began to speak, slowly and deliberately. She told him about her family, about the children she supported, and the sacrifices she had made to provide for them. She spoke of the challenges she faced, the small victories that brought her joy, and the resilience she had developed over time. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that resonated deeply with him. He listened intently, captivated by her honesty and strength. He realized how often he had judged life in terms of wealth, success, and recognition, overlooking the quiet courage that sustains people through everyday struggles. He saw that her life was full of purpose, dignity, and determination, and that her work was an extension of her character, not just a job. They continued to talk, the conversation flowing naturally. He shared parts of his own life, his successes, his failures, and the loneliness that sometimes accompanied his achievements. She listened without judgment, offering understanding and empathy that surprised him. In her presence, he felt seen not just as a wealthy employer, but as a human being. And he realized how rare and valuable that feeling was. As the evening deepened, he felt a sense of resolve. He wanted to do more than just acknowledge her efforts with words. He wanted to take meaningful action to ensure she felt valued, supported, and respected. He knew that material gestures alone were not enough. They had to be accompanied by genuine recognition, trust, and opportunities for her to feel empowered. He began by offering her practical support, resources she could use for her family, assistance in areas she had struggled with, and the chance to pursue personal goals she had put aside for years. She was initially hesitant, declining some offers out of modesty, but he persisted gently, explaining that his intention was not charity, but acknowledgement of her worth and the impact of her work. Slowly, she began to accept, realizing that his gestures were sincere, thoughtful, and rooted in genuine respect. Each acceptance brought a small change, not just materially, but emotionally. She felt seen, honored, and valued in a way she had never experienced before. Her pride was no longer quiet. It had a voice, and that voice was being heard. He also made changes in the household, ensuring that her work was recognized openly. He encouraged the other staff to acknowledge her contributions, creating an environment of respect and collaboration. He wanted the recognition to be lasting, not fleeting, a constant reminder that her efforts were meaningful and appreciated. As the days passed, their relationship grew, not as employer and employee, but as two people who had discovered the power of recognition, empathy, and human connection. He found himself checking in with her, listening to her thoughts, and learning from her perspective. He realized that wealth and status had blinded him to the true value of life, and she had taught him a lesson he would carry forever. He also noticed changes within himself. He became more attentive, more patient, and more aware of the people around him. The lessons he had learned from her presence extended beyond the walls of the house. They influenced how he interacted with colleagues, friends, and family. He understood that the recognition of human effort and dignity was not limited to wealth or position. It was a principle that could transform every aspect of life. One day, he invited her to sit with him in the garden, surrounded by the roses and sunlight he had once passed by without notice. He wanted her to see that her influence extended beyond the house. Her care and attention had created a space of warmth and beauty that touched everyone in it. She looked around, smiling softly, and he realized that her pride was no longer silent. It radiated in her posture, her expression, and her confidence. He spoke quietly, sincerely. "You've changed my perspective on life. I've spent so many years chasing success, money, and recognition, and I overlooked the quiet strength, dedication, and humanity that surround me. You've shown me what truly matters." She looked at him, her eyes bright, and replied, "I just do my work, and I try to do it well. I never expected to be recognized, but I'm glad that it matters to you." He smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The lessons he had learned from her presence, her dedication, and her humility were invaluable. He realized that the true measure of wealth was not in money or possessions, but in respect, connection, the recognition of human effort. He made a decision that would reflect this understanding permanently. He established opportunities for her growth, learning, and personal fulfillment. He ensured that her efforts would be honored consistently, that she would feel valued, and that the dignity of her work would be celebrated. It was not about grandeur or extravagance. It was about acknowledgement, respect, and genuine care. She continued her work, but now with a sense of pride, ease, and empowerment. The house itself seemed to reflect this change, as if her confidence and recognition had infused it with warmth and life. He watched her, feeling gratitude for the lessons she had imparted simply by being herself, by working with care, living with dignity, and facing life's challenges with resilience. Over time, their connection grew into a quiet friendship. He found himself sharing thoughts, seeking advice, and valuing her perspective in ways he had never expected. She, in turn, appreciated his sincerity, his respect, and the acknowledgement of her worth. Their bond was built on mutual understanding, trust, and recognition, and it transformed both their lives. One afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, he reflected on how much had changed since his unexpected return. He had come home seeking comfort, but he had found something far more valuable: a human connection, insight into the life of someone remarkable, and a deeper understanding of what truly matters. He realized that life's most meaningful moments often come unexpectedly, in small gestures, in quiet acts of dedication, and in the recognition of others' humanity. She had given him this gift without realizing it, simply by being diligent, caring, and true to herself. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, knowing that this encounter would stay with him forever. As the sun set, Painting the sky in warm hues, he looked at her and smiled. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything, for showing me what it means to care, to dedicate oneself, and to live with dignity. You've changed my life in ways I can't put into words." She smiled back, a gentle, proud expression that reflected her acknowledgement of his sincerity and her own quiet strength. "I'm glad that I could help, even in a small way," she said softly. In that moment, the house was no longer just a mansion of wealth. It was alive with human connection, respect, and understanding. He realized that this day, this moment, and this person had transformed his perspective forever. He understood that true wealth lay not in money, possessions, or status, but in recognizing and honoring the effort, dedication, and humanity of those around us. And so, the millionaire's unexpected return became a turning point, not just for him, but for the household, for the relationship he had built, and for the understanding that true appreciation and respect can change lives. The house was no longer just a place to live. It was a place where care, dedication, and human connection were celebrated, and where a simple acknowledgement of effort had the power to transform hearts. He knew that he would never again take the quiet strength of others for granted. And she, finally seen and appreciated, continued her work with pride, confidence, and the knowledge that her efforts mattered in ways she had never imagined. Together, they had created a bond rooted in respect, understanding, and the power of human recognition, a bond that would endure long after the sun had set and the day had ended.